This much for the start from our side. And now I would like to invite Hannes Swoboda, member of European Parliament, to chair the next session, ex-member of European Parliament, in our hearts always, apparently. Hannes Swoboda is going to chair the next session, Voices of Mayors, and for this session I would like to invite Hassan Alrhaibeh, Mayor Jimal, Jordania. Luigi Ammatuna, Mayor Pozzallo, Italy. Andreas Babler, Mayor Traiskirchen, Austria. Ali Mattar, Mayor Sahel Zahrani, Lebanon. Lefteris Papagiannakis, Vice Mayor, Migrant and Refugee Affairs, Athens, Greece. And Mustafa Tosun, Mayor, Dikili, Turkey.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everybody here on the stage, and good morning in the plenary. We're very happy that you are here, and yeah, maybe after that very impressive presentation of the capacities and possibilities of refugees in our countries, my first question, of course, to the mayors and representatives here on the podium is how they see, is it possible to engage in their cities, young people, refugees who come here, and how is the situation in general? We have, of course, to be very brief because we have not too much time, but maybe we just make a round and I ask you, Lefteris, if I may use the first name because it's a bit easier. And we know each other for some time already. Lefteris, how do you see the situation in Athens or wherever you are, look into Greece?
Good morning, first of all. Thank you for the invitation. We've seen that things are difficult. We have about 1,300 kids outside of shelters and structures that can accommodate them, and that makes it very difficult, but we have many good activities and good practices that are working. As you know, children are very adaptable. They can learn the language in a very, very short time, and that allows them to integrate better than their parents, for example. And I think that we should do something specific for them, not the way we do for adults. We started school since September. For many of them, things are going slowly, but it's picking up. I can name a lot of activities and good practices, but we don't have the time. Maybe we will do it in the workshops. So there are things that work and things that do not work. So we have to sort these out and choose what is the best solution.
Thank you. Luigi, Italy was a bit out of the public attention. Now it's back again because of many refugees still coming over the sea, if they can succeed. About the young people, the younger generation in your town in Italy, is there a chance for them to be integrated? Is Italy doing enough? Can you do something on your level as mayor to give young people a chance to enrich Italian society by migration?
Buongiorno a tutti, mi scuso se non parlo l'inglese. Ringrazio gli organizzatori per avermi invitato a questo evento. Ritorno per la terza volta e mi sento di casa. Pozzallo è una città che accoglie tantissimi immigrati, tantissimi bambini. sono raddoppiati negli ultimi tempi. Prima arrivavano minori non accompagnati nell'ordine di 150-200 l'anno, ora ne arrivano 400-500. Quindi abbiamo questa esigenza di doverli sistemare in strutture accreditate. La nostra città è un punto di approdo e quindi poi passano a essere trasferiti in tantissimi comuni italiani dove lì possono attuare politiche di inserimento e di attività che possono fare inserire nel tessuto connettivo italiano questi bambini. Sicuramente vengono mandati a scuola, c'è un'opera di alfabetizzazione, fanno fare delle attività sportive, ricreative e quindi in questo senso si lavora in Italia per cercare di dare una nuova dignità a queste persone che arrivano dall'altra parte del Mediterraneo. Vorrei raccontare una storia, se mi è consentito, brevissima. È la storia di una ragazza di 17 anni arrivata a Pozzallo con un bambino di 1 anno e incinta di 9 mesi e 2 fratellini di 7 e 6 anni. Solo 10 giorni fa ha partorito e ha avuto un bellissimo bambino. Quindi sicuramente questa famiglia che viene mandata in una struttura accreditata sicuramente potrà avere la possibilità di doversi inserire nel contesto italiano. C'è molto da fare, molto il governo deve assumere delle decisioni e delle responsabilità per consentire a questi ragazzi di poter avere un futuro migliore. Un altro caso di una ragazza che a giorni partorirà, che è stata accompagnata da tantissime amiche. Queste amiche non l'hanno voluta lasciare, malgrado fossero minori non accompagnati, quindi da portare in queste strutture, hanno voluto rimanere a Pozzallo fino a quando non partorisce e quindi avere la possibilità di conoscere questo nuovo bambino. Una battuta. Nella porta del mio ufficio molte volte mettono dei fiocchi rosa e azzurri, perché mi dicono che io sono il papà di questi bambini perché sono affidati a me. È un momento di gioia per il nostro comune, ma che svela quanto drammaticità, quanti problemi ci sono e quanta speranza c'è.
Mille grazie, mille grazie. Now, coming to Jordan, there are still many, many refugees in your country. There are refugees from the past, from Palestine. There are refugees now from Syria, Iraq, and so on. And as well, it's very difficult in the job situation you are in the economic development, to integrate, especially the younger generation, to give them schooling, to give them training. How is Jordan managing, and how can you in your city manage that enormous task in your own country, in your own city?
أسعد الله صباحكم
Good
سيدي.
morning, ladies and gentlemen.
أنا رئيس بلدية الجمال
I'm the
على
mayor
الحدود
of
السورية
Shmiel,
الأردنية.
located close
هذه
to the Syrian-Jordanian
البلدية
border,
سوريا مخيم الزعفران
right next to the Sada refugee camp.
الشهير.
The camp is subject to the municipal authorities of Shmiel. It is one of the most important camps in our country. Our experience with the reception and support of refugees dates back to 1948, with the first war in Palestine. And then in 1967, when Israel marched into Gaza and the West Bank. Then 1991 with the invasion of Kuwait, 2003 with the American invasion of Iraq. Refugee crises in Jordan thus kept repeating themselves, as Jordan for the refugees was a safe country, so that anyone suffering repression in their country came to live in Jordan, where they were treated well and could feel safe. We treat refugees in line with our obligations to the civil society. The Syrian crisis started in about 2011. in the 9th month, when the refugees, when the refugee wave started to arrive. We could not believe that the number of refugees would keep rising, so that each day thousands and tens of thousands started to arrive. Honestly, the number was so immense and we had to bear a huge responsibility. The Jordanians, organizations and the society were willing to take in the refugees and the arrivals, both men and women. At the end of 2016 and beginning of 2017, the number of refugees totaled about 1 million. The number of pupils and students now in schools and universities totals 145,000. This number is a greater burden than you can imagine. 100 schools are open for the refugees, even in the evenings, 98 of which are open night and day to cover all students. We also have 8 organizations that have started operations with refugees with the government's approval. As we know, minors are most important, but the most important and the most vulnerable and sensitive in the world. So it is important for them to have a place in schools. The crisis was enormous. In Jordan, we have 85 nationalities in our schools. That is 200,000 pupils and students. They constitute a major burden for us and for the Jordanian society, as well as for the economy. We've invested a lot so that these children can go to school, because the right investments for the future is investing in these children who must go to school. The whole world must help these children. Jordan's government plans to build 5,000 classrooms before the end of 2017, so that children will be in a safe environment. They can then complete their education there. In a few minutes, I cannot summarize everything that is happening in Jordan, but we will discuss it during the workshops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have visited your city. I visited Al-Satari, the camp, and to all the people in Austria and Europe who say it's unbelievable what we can do. We cannot support so many refugees. If you look to Jordan, you can see what you can do if you want, and if you have the willingness, or if there's no alternative, just to help. And thank you again for what Jordan and you are doing. And the same is true, of course, for Lebanon. Lebanon has its own problems, own splits and divisions in the society, and difficulty for many years to find a president for the country, many other things. But at the same time, Lebanon not only survived, but Lebanon did also a great job. Again, it has many refugees from Palestine from many, many years, had civil wars, but still Lebanon is trying to tackle the refugee problem. How is the situation today in your city, in Lebanon? How can you, can you do something for the younger generation, that it is not left alone, that is not isolated and pushed aside, but that can be integrated, or at least educated, trained, that if they go back to Syria, that they can do a good job and find some possibilities in reconstructing the country? Please.
شكرا.
Thank you very much. At first, I should like to thank the organizers of this event, as well as the participants and the representatives of organizations, as well as the organizations themselves and the mayors and representatives of the town halls. To start with, it is important to get an overview and an idea of Lebanon. And as was said previously, Lebanon since 1950 has been suffering from the migration crisis. The common economic situation is also highly challenging, as are the political and the security situation. Despite everything, Lebanon has welcomed more than 2 million immigrants. Other countries might be able to handle such a number of arrivals, but Lebanon only has a total population of 4.5 million. So how can Lebanon handle such a number, which is half of its population? Despite all, in Lebanon we have more than 200,000 pupils and students. But there are also 180,000 who have not found a place to study. This is a dangerous number. For the international organizations, for the institutions who must all keep an eye on the threat. In Lebanon, childhood is neglected every day. Lebanon's health system is insufficient. Vaccination for children, vaccination for newborns, for immigrants, the shelf life of pharmaceuticals, education, the criteria of what is offered in schools. Food has often passed its shelf life date. There are no controls of shelf life dates, no controls of water quality. The law punishes all trafficking of children and girls and fights networks of cross-border prostitution, exploiting the situation of these girls. Most at risk are the rights of children, female migrants and their families. This is a challenge of identities and ethnicities. I've already mentioned the situation in Lebanon. The number of migrants totals more than half of the local population. They are employed, they open their own businesses, they also get water and power, and they use the entire infrastructure and services for free, other than the Lebanese. The Lebanese pay for all of these, but the migrants use them for free. Plus, they also are a competition for their businesses. Earlier you asked my colleague whether we use the energy of the refugees. If we say no, we're not realistic. The migrants total almost half of our population, and they're all young, which is like a fire, which is used in every society to activate it. No matter whether in our country or elsewhere, this is a strength we must use wisely, both in their interest and in ours. Migrants are a loss for their countries, and we must profit from them. If we look after the migrants' interests, we must thoroughly research and employ wise means to alter the situation so that we can put an end to this sad situation. From an economic perspective, this is a power. From a humanitarian perspective, they are victims of what is actually happening in Syria. The biggest tragedy since the Second World War is the tragedy in Syria. The whole world is suffering from this crisis. Millions of refugees and migrants, millions of victims. We're here now in Vienna, and we are affected by the crisis in Syria. We must look for efficient means to stop the war in Syria and make it possible for the refugees to return to their countries. This is the best thing we can do. The best service we can provide for the migrants is to enable them to return home and protect their honor. As you've heard, many countries provide them with education, shelter, food. All of this is nothing compared to allowing them to go home and restore their honor. Thank you.
Yes, of course, we all hope that people can go back as soon as possible into their own country, but it will be an enormous task to rebuild and restructure a country, and physically, morally, politically, but nevertheless, that is all our hope and desire. May I first go to Turkey before coming back to European Union, to Austria specific. Andreas already expressed our sympathies, our solidarity with many people in Turkey who suffer from the recent developments. This is not the issue for here, but whenever we speak about Turkey, of course, this comes into our mind. Secondly, of course, the EU-Turkey deal, contract, agreement is hope of many people that it will keep tight with all the criticism some people have on it. But how do you see the situation in your country, in your town? How you think can Turkey integrate citizens, young citizens, use its possibility not for political purpose, not to play the one against the other, the refugees against the Kurds or whatever, but is there a possibility for integration into your country, or preparing young people to go back to Syria with some new capacities, new skills? How do you see the situation?
Hepinizi sevgiyle selamlıyorum ve NOW grubuna
Ich möchte Sie alle herzlich grüßen
dolayı da hepinizi
und
salondaki dostları.
ich möchte der NOW-Gruppe danken für diesen sehr sensiblen Ansatz. Wir ebenso wie andere Länder in der Region leidet natürlich auch die Türkei unter sehr vielen Flüchtlingen. 30 Millionen sind 3 Millionen sind registrierte Flüchtlinge, 1 Million sind nicht registriert und 1,5 Millionen dieser 4 Millionen sind Kinder. In den Lagern haben wir nur 300.000 dieser Kinder in Schulen einschulen können, aber sehr viele von denen besuchen tatsächlich den Unterricht nicht. Es besteht ein Unterricht der Unterbringung, ein Drittel, wie gesagt, ist in Schulen angemeldet, aber 70% hat tatsächlich Bildungsprobleme, weil sie nicht zur Schule gehen. Und natürlich gibt es auch daneben sexuellen Missbrauch, insbesondere für Mädchen im Alter von 12 bis 17 Jahren. 60% von denen sind schon verheiratet, Kinderehen, die typisch sind für Länder in der Region. 40% dieser Mädchen sind sogar schon schwanger. Und Menschen betrachten das oft als eine normale Situation, aber das ist eine Tragödie. Wenn Sie sich diese Flüchtlingskinder ansehen, dann halten sie sich oft für wertlos. Sie haben das Gefühl, sie haben kein Heimatland, keinen Ort, wo sie dazugehören. Und manche von ihnen sind von den Tragödien des Krieges so geprägt. 50% von ihnen leiden unter posttraumatischen Stress. Und diese Probleme können natürlich nicht in den Ländern der Region gelöst werden, weil die Zahl der Flüchtlinge so hoch ist. Und die Länder der Region sind hier hilflos. Wie gesagt, bei 3 Millionen registrierter Flüchtlinge, wie kann die Türkei das Problem alleine lösen? Aber es wird von uns eine Lösung erwartet, aber das ist unmöglich. Solange der Krieg andauert, werden die Flüchtlinge zu uns kommen. Was wäre also eine Lösung? Obwohl wir alle hier sind heute und glauben, dass wir überzeugt sind, dass wir helfen sollen, sehen wir doch, dass wir im Nahen Osten das Problem nicht lösen können, solange der Krieg andauert, solange kein Frieden geschlossen wird, denn so lange werden die Flüchtlinge zu uns kommen. Kinder und Flüchtlinge kommen gerne nach Europa, weil hier die Lebensbedingungen besser sind. In Dikili, meine Stadt, gibt es Menschen, die illegal versuchen, zum Beispiel nach Griechenland, nach Lesbos überzusetzen. Und auch wenn wir alle Maßnahmen setzen, leider, es ist einfach so, dass die Menschen nach Europa weiterreisen
Now
wollen.
we switch to German, to Austrian German. Andreas, ich habe heute in den frühen Nachrichten gehört, die Österreich
I recently heard in the Austrian government is looking at such important questions as the burqa ban, but of course this doesn't resolve the refugee problem. How do you view the situation after 1 year? We've met at the NOW conference 1 year ago, and of course in the meantime, from your viewpoint, how do young people live now? What is the situation for young people? What can communities do in order to assist both unaccompanied minors and young people who've come with their families? Isn't it really about not just warning them off, but rather viewing these people as an opportunity and giving them an opportunity? As we've seen, some of them can really contribute a great deal. Andreas, floor is yours. Yes, I think you've really put it very succinctly. We're living in a very paradoxical, terrible paradox. On the one hand, we consume the horrors that happen every day in the world. And for example, there is one young people from Nigeria, for example. There are many at my refugee camp. 500,000 children are threatened by starvation north of Nigeria. There are some villages that were controlled by Boko Haram for years, and there are no children aged 2 to 4 anymore. And so we know what happens to these young people coming to Austria. At the same time, we're trying to erect walls. So with this paradox, we must recognize, and at the same time, we must act in a different way. And of course, this also is reflected in political action. Municipalities that cooperate with the tablets, and in that way, we have not made any progress. But there's another paradox that is more positive, namely, in areas where there are small refugee camps on-site, small projects for example, unaccompanied minors or refugee families, and there you find a much different mood, much different from that, for example, published in the tablets. Something positive, a new civil society has developed in these small communities. Some mayors have told me that they would not have believed the positive potential and mutual understanding is possible between a small municipality and the refugees. So these two paradoxes are determining our daily discourse on the issue. But we have not gone further about one point that we have discussed last year, namely that we have to take one step into the future, getting away from just toleration of refugees, but rather acceptance of refugees and the causes of their flight. And we in Austria were still in the same point. We're still treading water in the field of institutions, and this is really deplorable. Now, you asked me about young people, about children. Well, during the crisis of the refugee crisis that, of course, also hit Austria 18 months ago, we launched a number of projects that actually were fomented by NGOs, civil society. We have, for example, established Connect in my town, Traiskirchen. We had 2,000 children, refugee children, and this project was also diffused in Austria. So it's really a low-level standard, namely trying to offer young people an alternative of spending their time than just sitting around, and giving them a kind of valve to exploiting their energies. And this has resulted in a great deal of creativity. Many artists that have been stimulated, or children that have played soccer, for example, together with amateur teams. So there are many Connect teams all over Austria. There are two species, civil society that works on site, on the ground, with children and young adolescents, and of course there's the opposite faction. In Austria, as in other European cities, we have the problem that it is attempted to, the right-wing populists are trying to construct contradictions in society, saying that those people who do something for the refugees neglect their own country, and this leads to a kind of fracturing of civil society. So in my city, which of course is very symbolic in the field of refugees due to the camp, we have tried to develop an ecological garden project and make it become part of an ecological cycle that involves also schools, where we've got the textile workshop, a social market, and long-term unemployed Austrians that have also found work through this project, showing that we help people who need help, no matter whether these people are refugees or Austrians, people who have been living in Austria for a long time. And in this way, I think we can overcome this contradiction and create more acceptance, because the local population sees that they can work together with young refugees in order to help people who need help. And a final sentence, something that I'm missing a bit, that of course we have tasks, yes, but it's really ridiculous to have this discussion in Austria. Look at the figures in Austria and for all of Europe. How many people come to us? I mean, my colleague here sitting beside me from the Lebanon, I mean, they really have problems, but in Austria we have really first world problems that should not be exploited politically to start a social dumping discussion in Austria via the refugee excuse. But we are quite hopeful, but because the people that are responsible on the site are also, most cases, very humanitarian. Thank you.
Then last round, and I may take up what you just said about the relationship between citizens who are already here, they have been migrating before, or not from migrating families, but they have also problems. They are unemployed, or they have precarious jobs. So maybe we can briefly take up the question, how do you see the relationship between the citizens who have already been here and the newcomers, migrants, but especially, of course, refugees? Well, let's start again with Greece. You know, very often we hear about Golden Dawn and their activities, but sure, there is also other activities, civil society, from the people who help, and how do you see the situation in Greece, especially, of course, in Athens, as you are the responsible vice mayor?
Yes. As you know, civil society has been very, very active, pretty much like the mayor of Traiskirchen described. And we had a lot of help also from the migrant communities who have been in Athens and in Greece for more than 35, 40 years. Without them, the management of the first day of the increased flows of refugees would be impossible. For example, the Afghan community was present when refugees occupied the central squares of Athens, public parks, etc., because we didn't have the appropriate space to accommodate them. So without their help, this would be impossible. Of course, there is a discussion on how do we treat the three different categories of people that we have now in Athens: refugees, newcomers, as we call them, migrants, and of course the citizens. So the question of social cohesion is very, very important for us. The mayor has said that everything we do has to have that notion as an umbrella. I mean, social cohesion activities to include all interested parties. Of course, this is very difficult because we must not forget that Greece is also facing a huge economic and financial crisis, and we are entering year 7 of that crisis. I'm not giving any excuses as to what Greece has done to find herself in that position, but on the other hand, we must acknowledge the fact that we have a crisis within a crisis within a crisis within a crisis. So it's very difficult to treat those crisis, if you want, independently. We have to find a way to include all issues and to find solutions for all problems, in a way. And this is, as you can understand, very, very complicated because different people have different needs, issues of accommodation, issues of education, healthcare, etc., and all of these standards that we've known in Greece and in Europe have collapsed due to the financial crisis. So we need to reconstruct many of those sectors, but in the same time to accommodate people who come in for the first time. So if you put all this together in a mix, it's very complicated, it's very difficult, and the pressure that we have from our creditors, friends and partners is unfair. I don't usually give excuses to my country. I'm very, very vocal about it. We found ourselves in that place because we helped. It didn't just happen. But on the other hand, the pressure that we are getting is unfair, to be very, very honest. It's unfair to be pointed at, by fingers saying, you were a bad student, so now you are going to be punished. This is a very, people do not understand that. They need solidarity. We are asking for solidarity, but we don't get solidarity. We don't get solidarity for the financial crisis, but on the other hand, we are asked to give solidarity on the refugee issue. So all this political debate and political discussion gives place, as the mayor said again, to populists using and taking advantage of this situation. And of course, we must not forget that we have the sad privilege in Greece to actually have a Nazi party in the parliament and in the local government. They got 7% in the last election. Apparently, because they are on trial now, their position is not getting stronger, but they're doing work on the ground. And this is very dangerous. And it can lead to very, very bad results. The continuous pressure on the population and society can create an explosive mix. And this is very dangerous. We should consider that also.
Ευχαριστώ. Now to the mayor of Pozzallo. You have always been very courageous in your positions. Who is helping you? Who is supporting you? Civil society, the citizens, or how can you bring about the support for your very courageous positions and very clear words you always use?
Unterstützung finden. Well, I've always had a very good relationship, with the Italian government, and I've always had a lot of support. We have, in a small village, small town of 19,000 inhabitants, we have accepted over the past 2 years 100,000 refugees. And the mayor of Traiskirchen spoke about the contradictions, and we have also these contradictions in Italy. We have shown to the whole world that we are willing to receive great parts of refugees, but there are parts of the society that refuse to do so. And recently, 9 women were not accepted in a village, and of course this was published in all the newspapers. And I heard yesterday that a boy that came to Pozzallo 2 years ago and was left to drown in the Canal Grande in Venice without anybody helping that person. And they saw him actually go under the water, and people were shouting, "Africa, Africa." I mean, these are contradictions that also exist in Italy. And we should, and there are thousands and millions of people who are arriving, who want to arrive, and if we do not create situations in their homelands, situation of peace, where an end of war and livable situations. Otherwise, the people will, of course, continue to leave their countries. And if we don't create peace in their countries, the situation will become more and more difficult. In the meantime, we can, of course, implement medium or long-term solutions, because we have to take in these people. We have to accommodate them. They need our assistance. And, of course, we're absolutely willing to do so, but because we understand that they come from very, very dramatic situations.
From time to time we hear some remarks or some news about the fragile situation in your country, maybe also in connection with the refugees. How can you survive politically with all the problems you have? We heard about the enormous tasks you have. How do you arrange that you have a future also as a mayor and as a city?
سيدي احنا الوضع السياسي هو يعني وهذا الجانب الحسن في الأردن.
Yes, the political situation in Jordan is very, very volatile.
وهذا ما يعني
Of course,
التعامل مع أي حدث موجود ضمن منطقة الصراع الموجودة عندنا في الشرق.
we want and desire to help everyone trapped in this crisis in the Middle East. Still, our financial situation is highly challenging. So we have a deficit of several $1 billion. I think it totals about 4 billion, which is definitely huge for an economy of the size of Jordan. Therefore, the migrants and the refugee situation for us is a big, big threat. In our kingdom, we are very moderate in our policies, and as you know, Mr. Hannes, that this is very much different in Syria. Therefore, we tried to distance ourselves from the war in Syria. Actually, the conflict itself is not a civil conflict, is not a civil war, but it definitely is a world war. We have all important big players there, and they all have interests of their own. We have Russia, Iran, and the US. So that it is very, very important to terminate this war that is now taking apart Syria and the entire region. Syrians are really drowning, which is absolutely appalling, talking about it from the humanitarian perspective. So first, we need to terminate this conflict and make peace. And also then heal all the injuries. And certainly the big players can do that because they have the capability, and they should also do that very urgently.
The situation and describe the situation in Lebanon, the long splits and divisions. Do you fear radicalization of the political life in Lebanon because of the refugee problem, because of maybe some radicals going into the country and create some turmoil, some splits between, or additional splits, additional divisions between Shiites and Sunnis? Is there a danger for the relative stability in Lebanon because of the refugee problem?
إذا كان الترجمة يعني دقيقة الذي فهمته هل أثرت.
So if this was translated right, you asked whether the penetration of some extremist elements in Lebanon also bring in more sexual conflict. Okay, that is correct. Good. So Lebanon, geographically being part of the Syrian territory, of course, also suffered that. Our history is a common one. We share the same religion, and there was the unity between Syria and Lebanon. We have for a very long time shared the same destiny. For a long time, our joint name was Bilad al-Sham, the Levant. The Levant includes Syria, Lebanon, and also Jordan, and therefore, because of the joint history we have been sharing and because of our geographic proximity, anything that affects one of the part of the Levant will certainly also then have effects on the others. This is something quite natural, and therefore it could also be positive but also negative, and hence the conflict in Syria of course also had effects on us. Lebanon, however, despite all these threats, was able to demine its territory. And by saying demine, I use this as a metaphor. It was able to neutralize the virulence of some of the attempts to really then make the conflict even worse and then cause greater harm to us than we actually did. But the situation still is challenging, and we still try to demine it and neutralize it. The election legislation, of course, still poses a great challenge for us, and we sincerely hope that we will be able to solve it, since otherwise this is going to compound the danger posed by the war on our borders. The mayor of Potasio, is this really Potasio? Pozzallo is the real name. So the mayor of Pozzallo said that if we help the refugees and if we help our services to them, then but I think that Europe has not really fulfilled its commitment, and this had Mr. Hannes actually asked whether it is extremism that is to be found there, and that has also effects in Lebanon with regard to the conflict between, or the feud between the Shiites and the Sunnites. You mentioned the Levant. I personally think that there is no such thing as the Levant. It's gone. However, religious extremism, doctrinal extremism in this region has now obtained proportions that simply cannot be ignored anymore. This is really a doctrinal religious conflict in Syria, and it has actually then also gone to other regions and has sent shockwaves throughout the region, even reaching Bahrain. Iran is also now part of it because Iran is a Shiite country, and therefore it's siding with the Shiites among the Arabs, and the Shiites in the Arab countries, they really think that they need to side with Iran more than they need to side with their own governments, and this is extremely preoccupying. What I want to say is this session has now been transformed into something highly political. We've also Bahrain now and other countries, and this is not really what we want to discuss here today. But if Mr. Hassan wants to put the responsibility on our side, then we need to look at the situation in a conflict. In conflicts, each party usually blames the others. Talking a bit earlier about Mr. Hassan, you said that there is an international conflict in Syria, and now it has changed his mind. He needs to stick by his word and decide what he means. Is he looking at the conflict as a regional one, an international one, a sectarian one, or what?
In an Arab conflict. The next time we will invite Iranians, so we have an additional discussion. Going back to Turkey, after all what happened, is it still possible, you think, that we have a cooperation between European Union and Turkey on the refugee issue? Because it's strange that there are two neighbors who have to work together on such an important issue, drifting apart more and more. But how do you see the future of EU-Turkey cooperation concerning the refugee question?
In my previous presentation, I had said yes. I know that Europeans are very sensitive on some points, but when we look at the agreement with the Turkish Republic, it is actually I am against, because this is a kind of negotiation based on humans. Of course, cooperation is important, but we have a serious number of refugees, 3 million people. It's not possible to solve it. And the countries of the region cannot solve that problems on their own, because the number of refugees is very high. Yes, we are experiencing this problem since 6 years and trying to find solutions. It started with the Arab Spring, and the only solution is peace in the region, peace in Syria, and all the other solutions are not real solutions, are not really, will not help us. Before stopping the war in Syria, before assuring peace in Syria, before getting rid of the terrorist groups, it will not be possible to solve the problems. Unfortunately, terrorism is such a burden on us. We are suffering that really. And the only solution is peace in the region, and that was the only thing that was not tried in Syria, peace. So if we could all concentrate on peace in Syria, and I believe that it would be easier to solve the problem. and the children and the young people who are here. And the Turkey is new Turkish municipalities, especially metropolitan municipalities, are trying to assist these young people. But the 23rd of April is the celebration of the establishment of our parliament. And in Turkey, it is called also the celebration of children. So I hope that these children will be able to go home if there is peace. I think that would be the best present we could give to the children and the young people to enable them to get back home.
Many people fear that radicality and extreme opinions, maybe even terrorism, will be transported into Europe together with the refugees, especially, of course, also by young people, but that also including young people who've been here for quite some time, as we saw recently when a 17-year-old Albanian, an Austrian with an Albanian background, is at least accused of having planned a terror attack. What do you think about that, Andreas? What do you think needs to be done so that we can briefly summarize and integrate young people, give them the opportunity to get away from these radical influences through the internet? What do you think is the main task from your point of view as a mayor? Definitely the 3 standard points that would need to an improvement of the situation. First, that would be too much, is to change the type of international economic policy. That is, get away from these horrible free trade agreements and towards solidarity economic systems, because it is quite clear that where we have a lack of perspectives, economic perspectives, hunger, we also find a very fertile field for terrorism. Second thing is to counteract this madness of flat accusations, all these religious wars that are being staged in one way or the other. And thirdly, the very specific goal of getting young people employed, offering them jobs. This is what is very decisive, in addition to all the minor things that are needed, including language, but also respective framework conditions, possibility to participate in society, and many other things. It is all about employment. If people have perspectives, and this is also what we discussed last year, people arrive, including some people who are very likely to be given political asylum, and if they're not asked about their resources, about their ideas, about their visions, as to how they themselves want to contribute to society, what they want to give back to this society in a positive way, to this receiving society offered as a new home. So if they're excluded from the start, it will not be possible to integrate them in a positive way, even if they want to be integrated. That is employment and a positive access, and that is our vision. Thank you so much. I would like to thank all of you very cordially for coming here and for participating in the discussion, for going on with discussions specifically about what can be done. All in all, I believe it was an optimistic outlook, going back to what we saw when the first young people came to Austria and showed so much creativity and potential. That definitely must be one of the messages. Flight and refugee movements are very difficult for the people who come, but for us, as a receiving society, it is a challenge, but a challenge that can be managed can release new creativity and new potential into our society. And here the mayors, of course, are in the first row when it comes to solving these situations. We cannot solve the war in Syria even, nor can we solve the tensions between the Shia and the Sunni, but certainly we can give people hope once they've lost it. So thank you very much, and we go on with the agenda, and then I'll pass back to the organization.